Hi, everybody. I am so excited. I'm Chef Lauren. There's Sonia. Sonia, are you on mute?
Sorry.
I'm like, oh no, I can't.
I am Sonia Dreiser. I'm here. My role today is to interview Chef Lauren while she cooks a dish for us. I'm a consultant in the industry, but that's not what we're here to talk about. Chef, why don't you take it away and tell us what we get to watch, and I will ask questions as you're cooking.
Okay, perfect. All right, guys. So you did get the list of ingredients. I don't get to see your glorious faces, but I know you guys are all ready with all your mise en place. I have mine here. You might be able to see a little bit of it, but I have it all set up for you. And I do have some stuff roasting in the oven, so I'll be able to put it together and show you a final product, as well as get you guys through making it yourselves, if that's what you're doing. Or if you're just watching, then you'll still be able to see a final product as well. So we are going to be making a stuffed squash today. I left it open. I'm using a delicata squash, but I left it open for you guys to choose what squash you would like. I also just had to pick up this adorable little honey nut squash that is local from New York. And they also grow in New Jersey too. I mean, they grow everywhere, but I tend to get the things that are growing more locally to me whenever I can. So this is a honey nut squash. This is almost like a baby butternut, and the flavor is super, super intense. So if you haven't used this, and you see it at your supermarkets or your farmers markets, then go ahead and grab it. And you can roast this just like you would a butternut squash, make soup from it, or just eat it in cubes or in with your vegetable medleys. But I chose to do a delicata squash today because it is actually my favorite squash, winter squash. And you can eat the skin too. That's why it's called a delicata squash, because the skin is delicate. And we are going to be stuffing it. I also gave you a list of what I'm going to put inside of this, but it's very loose. So you can really kind of do whatever you want. I do know that you guys did not want quinoa in there. So I brought some brown rice. And the cool thing about the brown rice that I cooked off earlier is that it's also local from New Jersey. So I got that. And I'm going to just make this really tasty autumn mixture and put it back into the roasted squash. So I'm going to start preparing this stuff, and then, Sonia, you can ask as you want, but I'll kind of chime in about what I'm doing as that's happening, and then we can kind of go from there. But I'm going to start with the delicata. And just for you guys who don't know, I'm going to cut it in half, and then I'm going to scoop the seeds out, and I'm going to try to keep the whole thing intact. This little stem might give me trouble. It might pop off. If it does, that's fine. I just kind of like the way it looks when it's all roasted together, when it's roasted intact. So I will, my first move won't be to cut the stem off. And that's what I feel like a lot of people do. But I want it to look like it just got picked and it's on the table all beautiful. So we're going to try to keep it on. But if it's the stem or your fingers, then take the stem off. So you can see, right? So since this one is pretty long, I'm going to meet it in the middle from both sides. So I'll start in the middle, go down, and you're going to hear that little crack. Make sure you get all the way through, go all the way down to the bottom of your board. And then I'm going to turn the squash around and go down. Oh, I kept the stem on one side. So there we go, right in half.
It's pretty good for delicata, right?
Yeah. It's nice. So then you're going to scoop the seeds out. And for those of you who may or may not follow me on social media, Twitter, you'll know that I like to keep almost all the scraps, and I make a vegetable stock out of them. And then I'll turn that into soup, or I'll use that for a sauce, or maybe I'll even cook my rice in that liquid, or whatever it may be. But I feel like a lot of people compost their scraps, which is totally fine because you're not wasting, but you can also boil them and then compost, or either way. But if it's just the garbage, or maybe make a stock, I'd say go ahead and make yourself a nice stock. And you can also freeze that too. If you're well, I'm not making soup, you can freeze the stock, the broth, in small containers. This way it's not in this big tub in your freezer. You can freeze it in in ice cube trays, and this way, and then freeze them, get them frozen, and then transfer that into a Ziploc bag. Yeah, this way you can just grab it as you want. So I'm taking out
my scraps in the freezer too. I have a running Tupperware where I just take the lid off and throw scraps in because I cook a lot, but not enough to make stock every weekend. But once it's full, then I'll make stock.
Yeah, for sure. That's also a good idea too. This way, like something like by the time you get enough to like make stock, like maybe some of the things that you're saving are going bad. So it's also good. It'll hold in the Ziploc for a while, but you definitely can keep that in the freezer too. And that's actually a really good suggestion. So once you get your squash all cleaned out from its seeds, you can give it a little rinse if you like. Not necessary. I did wash the squash on the outside before we started here, so you could give it a nice little washing because you're probably going to eat the skin or at least put that whole thing on your plate. So once you have it all empty, then you're going to put it onto your sheet pan with a piece of parchment paper. If you don't use parchment paper or anything on your sheet pan, that's totally fine too. I just like to use parchment on my sheet pan, or if you use foil, that's okay as well. And you want to get that roasted. So you're going to put it on your sheet pan, put it down. We're going to season it with some salt and pepper, put a little bit of olive oil in the cavity of that. And if it's a really large one, I might sprinkle like a little bit of water in here too with the olive oil, salt, and pepper. And then I'm going to put some of the fresh thyme I have right in the middle as well. And whatever herb, if you have like fresh sage or rosemary, whatever you have, you can kind of pop it in the middle here. And I keep it right on the stem. This way you can lift it off when it's finished, when you're done. And then you can put some fresh back in when we mix the whole like warm salad going on inside. So I put a couple of sprigs of that in there to the sheet pan, little salt and pepper. I'm going to take a garlic clove and smash that and put like one garlic clove inside each of the middle of the squash. Not necessary. If garlic isn't your thing, don't do it. If it is, then go ahead and do that. So I cut the stem off the garlic and then I just give it a little smash. It helps release the husk here. Yeah. Well, it also helps you take the skin off and then breaks it up a little bit. So then just like rustically put it inside the middle of the squash. And I keep like a little, like the container or whatever, or a bowl for like the scraps and everything. So I'm not going back and forth to the garbage every time I have a scrap. That also really helps kind of keeping the board nice and clean because it can get overwhelming. Like you have a ton of stuff on your cutting board and things are everywhere. And I feel like that's why people get overwhelmed in the kitchen. But if you stay organized as you go, I think it'll be a much more enjoyable thing. So
that's definitely a chef tip right there.
So I'm going to go ahead and season my squash here. A little salt and pepper.
Well, Lauren, while you're seasoning, tell us how you came to. What's your first food memory, and how did you come to become a chef, and how's your relationship with food evolved?
Oh, okay. So that's like there are like a few distinct things within that question. I would say my first food memory that really I think kind of pushed me over the edge to like kind of it all come together as far as me becoming a chef would be being at the dinner table and my dad making lima beans for part of our dinner. And I really just didn't like them as a child, and I'm not sure why, but I hated them. I love them now, but I didn't like them. And in our family, like if something was made for dinner, we had to eat it. So I wasn't allowed to leave until we finished eating those lima beans, or until I finished eating them. Of course, my siblings finished before me. Just gonna peel some carrots now. So you guys can go ahead and get your squash into the oven. We are gonna be roasting other things, but the squash, because you want to stuff it back, put the vegetables back in, you can go ahead if you haven't already. I think Lisa already has hers. Or roasted rather. You can go ahead and put that in the oven.
And the squash you're leaving cut side up in the oven, right? Yeah,
so I'm leaving it open like this. I did put a little bit of water in mine to help steam, but you don't have to. Everyone should have their ovens preheated to like 385 if you can stand the heat. If you had to do it at like 350 or 375, but I like to do 385. So back to the lima beans. I could not stand the lima beans, but I did finish. surprise.
Hi.
I did, just talking about the lima beans. So I did end up finishing eating my lima beans, but then when I was visiting my grandmother, I mentioned to my grandmother that Daddy made me eat all those nasty lima beans. And she looked and she goes, oh, baby. She was like, lima beans are really good. And I'm like, no, Grandma, no, they're not. And she made lima beans into succotash for me. And it was literally like something just hit me like in like my soul. And it was like so tasty. I couldn't believe that it was the same little green things that I was eating that I could barely swallow, that my grandmother like sauteed onions and butter and put the lima beans and the corn, and it was just so good. So like that is a very strong food memory in my brain. And not that I said then, like, oh, I'm going to be a chef, because I still feel like I didn't know that being a chef was an option yet. It just wasn't as popular as it is now. I'm just going to check it out. It wasn't as popular as it is now. And I just didn't really think that that was a thing. I knew that, like, obviously cooking was a thing. I just felt like it was something you had to do, you know, a chore and everyone has to eat kind of stuff. But I didn't know that, like, I could make my career that. And then, but I did.
Hang on just a second. Mm-hmm. Somebody asked you if you put any seasoning on the squash before it goes in the oven.
Yeah, salt and pepper inside, on the inside of the cavity of the squash. Salt, pepper, you can smash some garlic and do the fresh thyme. So I'm gonna be cutting the carrots now. So now I'm just gonna cut up the vegetables that I listed that I'm gonna be putting back inside the in the mixture. But this is where you can kind of do whatever you have. Like I'm using carrots. I have some roasted, I'm using Brussels sprouts, an apple, you can use a pear. I have an onion, fresh garlic, some thyme, but whatever you guys have at home, if you needed to sub out a root vegetable or put something else in there, you certainly can put anything you want back into this squash. But I'm just gonna be cutting away and chatting with you guys, but feel free to ask any questions as I'm going along. But right now, your squash should be in the oven. And then you should be working on some more vegetables to cut up and put in the oven as well, unless you wanted like more of a raw thing happening inside the squash. But I do recommend you cutting like the carrots on the thinner side or like the smaller side. So when you roast them, so they roast at a decent rate, depending on when you're doing this. If you wanted to eat it right now and kind of be finished at the same time as me, you might want to cut them a little bit thinner so they roast faster, but no rush for you guys. I have some pre-roasted, so I can obviously show you what it's supposed to look like, but you guys can kind of just cut, you know, a nice size and I'll show you. For something like this, I like to do like an oblique cut. So I move my knife like on an angle like this. You can see my board pretty well, right?
Yep.
Then I have the carrot, like a pretty little carrot like that. So, and I have multicolor carrots. Whole Foods does a good job, or the farmers markets obviously do like the multicolors. And what this dish is really like, you're just going to look at it first. You're like, wow, that's really pretty. So you want to get as many colors in there as you can. And I feel like I did a decent job of, so they got the green from the Brussels, the purple onion, we have the purple carrot, we have some orange carrots. I have the red skin from the apple I used. And then the fresh thyme is going to bring in some nice green as well. So you kind of want to get creative with the different colors you put in. So make it look pretty as well. So back to that. So I guess I know food story. I would say in high school, I took cooking class and I was super close with my cooking teacher. Probably one of the only classes that I did really well in. I wasn't the best student. It just like, not that it just took a lot more for me than some of my, other classmates to like kind of get there. But cooking, I mean, my teacher still talks about, I'm still in touch with her, and she still talks about how like, my notes were so great, but I was just so into it. And none of this like is clicking at that moment. Like the story that I told my grandmother, me being like sitting in the front of the class, the cooking class, taking the best notes and like really being diligent about all my homework, loving to cook in the when we did like the cooking labs and stuff. And to me, it's still just like, oh, I just like to cook. It's like a hobby, whatever. And then she had a college fair with like different culinary schools came to the cooking class and the showed us, and I'm like, oh, there's whole schools like devoted to this. And I didn't know that. And so Johnson & Wales, CIA, all of that. Turns out that I ended up going to my county college, Middlesex County College. I earned my associate's degree in culinary arts. And then just like straight from there, I've just been cooking ever since. During that time, one of my teachers was an adjunct teacher, and every semester he picked a student that would then come to work with him at the Hilton Short Hills. It was in New Jersey. It was the only 5-diamond hotel at the time. And he picked one student per class every semester to come and be an extern. I didn't get picked, but I did get hired. So the interns and externs, they didn't get paid. But I he didn't pick me as an intern. He picked an intern and then picked me actually to come on and get paid. So I got a job right out of college, which is pretty cool. Like the minute I was out of college, I had a job at a very, very awesome place. And I was there for about 5 years. I gained a lot of my knowledge through college. Though, for the 2 years, I worked at Charlie Brown's Steakhouse. It's like a local steakhouse in New Jersey. And I don't know how large the chain is, but some people might know of that. But it was definitely like a rough kitchen setting, and I earned like a lot of my kitchen chops there. But then when I went to the Hilton, I really started to refine my skills, and I got one of my closest friends now, and she's a mentor as well, took me under her wing. So I learned so much there, and then it kind of goes from there. Check-in, roasting. So I just cut the carrots. I still have my squash on the tray, but you shouldn't. It should be in the oven. Can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Can you tilt your pan a little?
Tilting. I'm like, I don't know what you're doing. So I'm tilted. So I have my squash here, but yours should be in the oven. And I have my carrots and my Brussels sprouts cut. I'm going to cut an apple next. Really apple. And I'm putting everything on the same sheet pan. So you guys can have the squash in on one cookie sheet already in the oven, then get the rest of your stuff that you're going to be mixing in onto another tray, and you can put that in separately. The squash will take a little longer, so go ahead and get the squash in the oven. So I'm cutting this apple. I like to cut it in quarters and then cut the core out, and then cut like larger chunks and throw that in there with the veggies. I use an apple a lot for roasting root vegetables because I feel like it's just a little surprise of sweetness. And depending on what root vegetables you're using, sometimes I throw radish in there or rutabaga or something like that. So if there's like on the more bitter side of a vegetable, the apple kind of always like, ooh, what is that? And people don't realize. And then I get like, oh, you're putting an apple with onions, and yeah, throw it in there. Just throw the apple in there. It adds a nice natural sweetness, and you'll be pleasantly surprised. Onion, isn't this thing so beautiful? All right.
And so, when you're ready, when you're not narrating, how did you go from being a chef at all these different places to deciding to run your own business? And you do home cooking for families, right? And catering?
Yeah, so I'm an in-home personal chef currently. I've been in the industry a little bit over 20 years, so I've been cooking professionally, including Charlie Brown's, since I was like 17 years old. And I did have a tiny job at a local sub shop when I was like 15, 16 years old. So I've been cooking for a long time, but I count like when I'm 17 as far as super professional. And so I've been a restaurant chef, an industry chef for a long time, up until 2017, when I decided to jump off the ocean of freedom. I mean, jump off the corporate ladder into the ocean of freedom is what I say. So I had been an executive chef in restaurants at this one restaurant group for about 10 years. And I had just decided to, it wasn't I just felt like I had reached my end there, and I ended up leaving a little abruptly, and I decided like I want to eventually have my own shop, the Tiny Onion, putting that out into existence. So in between then, but like leaving that corporate job into opening the Tiny Onion, I decided that I didn't want to work for another corporation. What am I going to do in the meantime? And I decided to just kind of lean on my network and do what I love to do. And that became building up my own business. And 3 years in, it's going pretty well. So here I am, Chef Lauren. So I go into homes. And I do kind of like, I'll do meal prep. I do cooking classes, cooking lessons with children, with adults. I have a handful of clients that just like different things. So I usually cater it to that specific person, but a lot of meal prep. I also do what's really popular, and I've had a couple of FinTech people as well. I do date nights. So I'll come into your home and simulate like a date night in your house, create a menu around you, and, cook for you there and actually like bring the restaurant to you.
I've seen some of that on Instagram. Oh, can you hold up the some so we can see how big each thing, or like hold up an apple? Somebody's asking how big.
I have an apple,
pretty big. Large. And how about onion?
Full of liquid. I have an onion. I just sliced it down. My Brussels sprouts I quartered, or you can leave in half. I actually quartered them for this tray, and I have them on the other that I'm going to show you in 1 second. And then I threw again some pieces of thyme right on there. Ooh, lost one. And sprinkled it with salt and pepper, drizzle with a little olive oil, and pop that into the oven.
Lovely. I've seen some of the behind the scenes for your home cooking on your Instagram stories, and I wish I lived closer so you could come be my home cook. I love to cook, but it would be nice to have somebody else doing some of the meals sometime.
Yes, no, I would love that. I really love it, and it's just so different than being a restaurant chef. Being an in-home chef, some people ask me the difference or what I like about it, and I just love the fact that I'm actually like building these awesome relationships with some really amazing people. I get a lot of referrals, so like if I have one awesome client and they refer me to their friend, like pretty much like, birds of a feather flock together. So it's just like another awesome person. And I just have like some really, really great clients that have become like family and friends. Like, I get close with their littles. I call them my junior clients. So their kids, like I'm like Aunt Lauren, Aunt Chef Lauren, so it's just great to be able to actually see you helping people in that moment, as opposed to, being a restaurant chef has its own separate like list of great things, but like I didn't really get to see the impact I was having, if I was having any at all. But I can see it when I'm in your home, or when you send me a text, or when I see people writing that they're eating their veggies, or even when they see a veggie, they think of me. So like that's really, really cool.
Is it weird to go from instead of being always in the same kitchen that you're used to and you know where everything is, to being in a different kitchen every, day or however frequently you're in other people's homes? And how is it? It must be weird to have professional chef skills and be in a residential kitchen. I know like my oven heats, kind of like better on the right side than the left side, and all those little different intricacies. How's that work for you?
That's interesting. Really quick, just taking a second. So you should have everything pretty much maybe in the oven now, I'm hoping, looking at the time. And then I have the stuff out of the oven, if you can see. I also roasted a couple sweet potatoes for myself, but I have the Brussels sprouts here, and I have the apple.
Did you toss those in anything?
Just the olive oil, salt, and pepper. And just kind of like drizzle it on and threw that in the oven. And it took about 20 minutes or so. 25 minutes to get roasty and toasty. You want to see some like color on this Brussels sprout, And then basically now and I have my delicata squash roasted, all nice and soft. So then I also just put a little bit of the brown rice into the bowl, and you don't have to use a grain. And if you want to use meat or ground meat or something, you could definitely do that. This is really like anything you want to mix together to make a tasty little mixture to put back inside your squash. It's totally, totally up to you. That's why I gave you guys a list rather than like a recipe that you have to follow and feel like so restricted. Just kind of do whatever you like. So I'm going to go ahead and put the vegetables into this bowl with the rice and mix it up. And now you can go ahead and like dress it how you would like to. Like,
and those are your cooked vegetables, right?
These are the cooked ones. Yep. The other ones that I'm going to roast up, like I did the whole cooking show thing, but I have it ready for you. I just wanted to be able to show you guys kind of like what it happens. So I put the cooked vegetables into the bowl. And then if you have like a little honey mustard dressing, or you just have like some olive oil and vinegar if you like, or a little bit of squeeze of lemon, just something to dress it up. Everything is seasoned here. It has the oil on it. so you don't have to, but some people, like if you want to make like a little warm salad, I would, did you see it fly out of the bowl there? I just like to kind of dress it a little bit with like a light homemade dressing that you make yourself. And I've been doing a lot of like jar dressings, putting like a little bit of a binder into the jar, like getting a ball jar, putting like a little bit of mustard, a little bit of honey, doing whatever vinegar you want, like a quarter amount to whatever oil is, like 3 to 1, whatever oil you're going to use. So put a little bit of vinegar and then put your oil in and then shake it. And then you just have like an instant dressing. So I like to do that. But I actually have some balsamic here, and I'm just going to use a little bit of balsamic vinegar and some olive oil separate. And you can just use lemon too if you like. I also like using a lemon for a lot of it. I keep my oil in a quart container, so. And then you would taste it and see. I know the rice doesn't have too much seasoning on it, so I am gonna go ahead and season mine, but you should taste before you get to this point, just to make sure. The salt, yeah, and I mix my salt and pepper together sometimes, so I have it all together. So in this bowl, I have the brown rice, I have the roasted carrots, the Brussels sprouts, the onions, the apple, everything is all mixed in there. I put a little bit of this really tasty balsamic vinegar and then some olive oil, seasoned it again.
And everything in the bowl is cooked, right? Rice is cooked, veggies is cooked.
Everything. Yep, everything cooked. And then I might just like put some fresh thyme on top. And then you just have your squash. Now, if you have a bigger squash, like this can be a side for the table, or a tiny squash, it can be like one for every person, or you can make a bunch and do like for family style, however you want. It just looks, even if you use like this squash, it just looks really pretty on the table. So something for Thanksgiving, if you have vegetarians coming over or vegans, you can certainly prepare this for them. And then have it like as an option at Thanksgiving. So now you make your mixture and now you just put it back into your squash. What you can do though, really quick, is to just like lift up a little bit of the squash in here, take your spoon and kind of lift it up. And if it's like an acorn squash that you're using or a butternut, and there's a lot of squash, like a lot of meat, you can take it out and mix it into the bowl and then put everything back in. Or you can leave it a little bit at the bottom here and then pile your mixture that we made on top. And I think in this case, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna scrape it up a little bit. So like when we're eating it, we kind of know it's there. But with this, like I said, the delicata, you can eat the skin. Something like
it's tasty. Delicata is my favorite kind of squash.
Yeah, mine too. So when you're plating this, you just wanna make sure you're getting a little bit of everything into the squash. And then if you have leftover, you can, like, depending on, you know, whatever floats your boat, you can have some spilling over. You can put it into a side bowl. It really just depends on what you're doing. But you want to kind of just, if they're only seeing this one little squash, you want to try to get a little bit of every color happening, a little bit of everything. So when they take a bite, they get the apple, they get the carrot, they get a little bit of Brussels and the onion. Wipe the plate. And then you can take some fresh thyme and either you can lay it right on top if you like that, or you can take it off and do a little sprinkle. So just run your fingers down, take the little thyme leaves off, kind of put it. You can then drizzle a little bit more olive oil on there, but I don't know if I can. Can you see? Are we good?
You tilted just a little, let it fall off.
And it's gonna like slide right off. That'd be a fun way to say goodbye to everybody and dumps all over the counter. But all right, so I really hope that everyone made this and that it's delicious. I do know that there's something happening, like if you guys took a picture of you making it or your final product or something and you are in the running for something pretty fabulous. So take your pictures. If you are screenshotting me, make sure you get my good side, please, guys. But otherwise, definitely go ahead and I'd like to see them too, so you can tag me on Twitter or whatever social media you're on at Chef Lauren Owens. I'd love to see your final dishes. If you guys have any questions, reach out to me in any way. I'm available on all of the media platforms as well, or via my website. And I had such a great time.
It was so great. I know we're right up against the hour, but I'm just going to check the chat and the questions to see if there's any other feedback or questions for you. Let's see. I see some people saying fun session and things that you've taught people. That's it. It looks like we don't have other questions coming in. Can you tell us your website and social media handles one more time so people know where to find you?
Yes, so I'm at Chef Lauren Owens on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, all at Chef Lauren Owens. And then my website is at cheflaurenowens.com. Or not at, but cheflaurenowens.com.
Well, thank you to Lisa Allen, who helped put all of this together, and to Advisor 2X for hosting. It was such a pleasure to watch, and I'll be cooking, but later. And it's a pleasure. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, everybody. Happy cooking and eat your veggies, guys. I plugged that in.